last 10. Carr tips it in, and it's Palou. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively, and then offense taking over the fight. Mama, there goes that man.
They have shared a brilliant championship battle, but the championship can only be won by one, and it's going Dutch in 2021. Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's edition of the Waterboy Experience. I am your host, the Waterboy himself, Davis McLemore. And boy, what a show we got lined up this week. We got some Swifties in the house, or just one Swiftie. We got some more Las Vegas Raider rants. We've got some different mixed in NFL news, some conspiracies. There's a lot of conspirators out there, if you will. And also, there seems to be a lot more drama around the NFL, and we're not really sure why. So me and my good buddy here are going to break it down for you. But let me go ahead and introduce him to you. The Red Bull chugging son of a gun, the CEO and CFO of Nye Productions, Mr. Jason Shaddix. Jason, how are you, my man?
Well, not too good. I'm having to listen to you try to come up with an intro, and it is so painful that whenever you go, and then here's Mr. Jason Shaddix, you're like, what do I say? And I got to cut it in post-production, which I'm not cutting this in post-production. I'm making it look nice and pretty for everybody else, but that fuck up is going to stay.
This is the fuck it, should we even try at this point episode. Do you agree?
We've been trying. I thought the shit quality and the shit reporting of this showed that we ain't trying, son.
Hey, admit it, the reporting on this show is fantastic. If news breaks, what do?
We're the last ones to cover it.
No, well, maybe, but we return it for a refund. Anyway, so let's just get straight into it. Let's go ahead and get the Taylor Swift stuff knocked out of the way because I'm tired of hearing about it and tired of seeing it. Of course, everybody knows Taylor Swift was there at the New York Jets game, which, by the way, the bigger story coming out of this game was Zach Wilson balled out. He outperformed Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes threw 2 interceptions for the first time in maybe, I don't want to say ever, and don't hold me to that, but this is the first time, at least in a long time, we've seen him throw 2 interceptions. It was a rough game for the Chiefs, but they were able to come back and do the things that they do, bad flags and whatever, but it doesn't matter. They won, and Zach Wilson had a great game, and you'll be very happy to know, also in attendance at the game was Aaron Rodgers. And apparently he is way ahead of his schedule on his recovery. And at this point, he's walking without a boot, which I think is good for Aaron Rodgers. But there's a lot of people saying, well, he might not come back this season. He's saying he will, but, only time will tell. So, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Zach Wilson real quick. He did fantastic. I just want to get that out of the way. And there's not really a chance that Zach Wilson is listening to this, but I want to say, kid, you did good. Don't beat yourself up about it.
I want to butt in real quick and say, Zach Wilson, he's been getting a lot of shit. I always said the kid was pretty good, pretty promising, but he turned it up. When he saw that voluptuous blonde up there, he said, man, I got to get me some of Mama Kelsey.
Ooh, there's a bigger love story going on over here. Maybe that's what really powered him to play the way that he did. Wow. But I wanted to call out, can we play audio? No? You don't want to edit that, do you? Okay, that's fair. You can leave that whole part in there too. But basically, and I don't really know where to find a transcript of it, after the game, Chris Jones was interviewed by Sunday Night Football's Rodney Harrison. Not Harrelson. I'm thinking of Woody Harrelson here. My bad. Rodney Harrison. Rodney Harrison basically, in a very roundabout way at first, was like, I'm sure you guys didn't really worry about Zach Wilson. Chris Jones was, he's just a guy. And I think he handled the whole situation perfectly, and I feel like he kind of knew what was going on here because he was basically like, well, Zach Wilson's a good player. He's improving each and every week, and we knew he was going to be a problem in this game, and he was. And Rodney Harrison went as far as to call him garbage, and Chris Jones backed it up with like, well, no, we know he's a special guy, and he will be in the future. And Rodney Harrison was like, special? No, he's a good player, but he's not special. So I just, the amount of just disrespect and unprofessionality, that's why nowadays it feels like I can't even watch football with some of those commentary teams. It's just the way that they say things, the verbiage, and they pick this one guy and they just meat ride him the entire game. And it's just, they don't call it down the middle anymore. There's no play-by-play. They talk about everything else going on around the game, or they talk about Taylor Swift 24/7. And honestly, the Sunday Night Football panel with, I believe it's Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth, is the absolute worst. Chris Collinsworth is, I will say it openly, he is the worst commentator in football history. But regardless, coming out of that game, I'm looking for big things from Zach Wilson, and I'm looking for the Chiefs to, unfortunately, possibly bounce back from the rough performance, and they won anyway, so what does it matter? And Taylor Swift was in attendance, if you couldn't tell. So, anyway, what are your thoughts on this?
Look, I think you're kind of sugarcoating what you're remembering. There's never been a time in any sport throughout history where the commentators weren't biased. Like, we know that the NFL is biased towards Patrick Mahomes, just like they were biased towards Tom Brady back in the day. I say back in the day, but it was only a couple of years ago. Point being, this isn't any different to what we've seen before. They're just doing what they're doing. And I will say that what Rodney Harris said was uncalled for. And I did ask you this when we were talking about it, and you said, and I asked you, well, did he ever play football? And you're like, yeah, Peyton Manning carried him to the Super Bowl. And I'm like, okay, you do have some leg to stand on to criticize him. At the same time, he wasn't a quarterback. It's a whole different position. Like, I get, football and all that, but there are nicer ways to say it. And yeah, we talk shit about the Chiefs and we talk shit about that, but we're not being paid by national television to say this. We're two guys in a bedroom. I'm not gonna continue. I'm not gonna continue that joke. But we're two guys.
Leave that in. You've got to.
But what I'm saying is, there's a different level of standards that you're doing. Right now, we aren't part of any organization. We don't have any dog in this race. We're two guys who are like, hey, let's talk about sports. Let's talk about sports. Just as anybody who's listening to this, when you're out with your buddies, you go to a bar and you're just watching football and you're talking about it. That's what we are. But when you're being paid by a major company to call it, you have to call it in a professional manner. And that's what's expected of you. And quite honestly, his comments, they didn't ring true. He didn't suck. I think Zach Wilson did pretty good. There was a lot of controversy behind the referees, but just his words didn't ring true. If the Jets would have lost 40-5, then you could have said, well, he's got a fucking point. He's brutal, but he's half a fucking point. But during this game, it's like, no, like if you watch the game, Zach Wilson was doing pretty damn good, all right? Better than Patrick at times. But it's just like there's no professionalism, but there's never been. Like, we complain about it, but there's never been. Like, John Madden is known as the guy who was always calling it, even. If they fucked up, well, they fucked up. But if his team fucked up, he's like, well, they fucked up. We want there to be professionalism, but there's not. I don't know. I'm 3 beers in and things are starting to go woozy.
Well, no, I mean, I get what you're saying. When it's your job to present football to the masses, to the audience, you're not supposed to show any bias. You're not supposed to show any disrespect to another player. He did just that. So ultimately, I mean, It's not even the fact, if he got on Twitter and said that, that's one thing, whatever. But he said it openly on a public broadcast on the show that he works for on a national network. That's not really a fair thing to do. So I wanted to ask you, in Formula One, has anything like this happened before? Like a commentator saying, well, that driver just sucks. Even if the driver does actually suck, or, maybe the driver actually did pretty good and they still said that he sucked.
So it wasn't exactly a commentator. Last year, Ted Kravitz, who's one of the pit lane commentators, usually when you're watching the Grand Prix, the main commentators, especially if you're on the Sky Sports broadcasting, it's Martin Brundle and Crofty. I forget his name, but it's Crofty. We know him as Crofty.
Great commentary team.
Yeah, great commentary team. And they're, like, a lot of people say, well, they're biased towards the British. No, I've been watching this for a while. It's like, they'll call bad shit when it's bad. Last year, for example, when George Russell, who's British and is racing for Mercedes and all that, when he got at it with Mick Schumacher and he was complaining about Mick in Singapore when Mick overtook him, he's like, oh, what is these what are these back markers doing, get in my way? They got on to him and they said, well, George shouldn't be saying that. I mean, it's fair ground. Even if the other car isn't as fast as yours, if they're making you work for it, that's their right. So they are the main team, and I feel that they're pretty 50-50 on things. They'll call things when they're like, well, I don't know about that. I personally think that the stewards are wrong. And then the stewards say, well, like this incident, there's no investigation towards it. There's no penalty. And then Martin Brundle will go, well, I think they're wrong, but that's my 2 cents. So I think they're fairly even. Now, Ted Kravitz, he made a comment about Max Verstappen and that Max isn't the real world champion because of 2021. So this was last year. And Max got pretty pissed off because say what you want. Yeah, rightfully so. But say what you want. I think following the season, Max Verstappen, even if people say, well, that ending, it was wrong for the stewards to do that. And it's like, look, at the end of the day, there was no rule saying that the safety car had to let every car go. That was a back marker and that was being lapped. No, there's no rule of that. There is now, but not back then. I think the way it happened is, well, it was a bad timing for a safety car. Lewis didn't go in, Max did, and that's what made the difference. And after that whole thing with Ted Kravitz, Max literally said, oh, well, I'm not doing any fucking interviews with Sky Sports. I'm fucking not dealing with this bullshit that they're going to be like this. And they had Ted apologize to Max saying, I'm sorry, basically, I shouldn't have said that. And now they're cool, but that's the only case that I know so far because I haven't been watching all my life. So I don't know if in the 2000s they were being biased or something like that. But for the most part, right now, they're not. But even when they're criticizing a driver, and they've criticized the driver for making wrong decisions, wrong moves, or like what the fuck were you thinking, braking like that or cutting that person off? They aren't mean, or they aren't, just destroying the guy for no reason. And they usually have a reason. And if they don't, they're like, well, that's an interesting thing. In Formula One, I feel there's a little bit more professionalism. Hopefully that's not something that happens in the NFL. Like I said, it's one thing when it's a couple of guys sitting in a bedroom. I know the joke, stop laughing. Sitting in a bedroom and just talking to shits. That's different from being a national commentator whose words ring out to more people. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
We're back. Finally. We're very sorry about that. Maybe we have to put in a little brief pause in post-production. But in reality, that brief pause was about 15 minutes. Because Jason, our technician here, our audio person.
A drug technician.
You've been on drugs today or something.
Drunk, not drugs.
Oh. Or maybe I am a little too. He forgot to press the mute button. But we're back. It's all good now. And honestly, I can't even remember what we were transitioning to next. I believe it was the Bears and the Broncos game. Yeah, because the whole thing was we were going to go from two of the better teams to the two worst. and the Broncos won and asserted themselves as the second worst team in football, right ahead of the Chicago Bears. So very, very poor performance from the Chicago Bears, very poor performance from everyone around. Let's give ourselves a big round of applause. So, whatever. Well, I guess coming out of our little break, I already got worked up a little bit. I might as well go ahead and get the Las Vegas Raiders Josh McDaniels segment out of the way. We played the Chargers. We got our asses handed to us, especially on their defensive side of the ball. Our former defensive end and my former favorite player in the league, Khalil Mack, racked up 6 sacks on the day, a historic number. All around, it was a terrible game on our part. It was what it was, and it was just more of the same old, just fire Josh McDaniels. Now, we know he's incompetent. We know he's narcissistic. We know that he is self-centered, and he thinks his farts smell like shit. Wait, well, not like... Cut that one out.
I'm keeping that in.
You keeping that in. He thinks his farts smell like silk or whatever. Flowers, whatever. Whatever smells good to you. Silk can smell good. Don't get me worked up right before I do this. So, Khalil Mack was a problem throughout the day. And after the game in the press conference, Josh McDaniels had this to say. And I'm getting this from a fan page on Instagram because, of course, I follow Raider fan pages. This is Raiders Wrap. They said, quote, "There were a number of snaps that there were multiple people assigned to, him and him only. We did everything we could to try to disrupt him with another player." That was Josh McDaniels on Khalil Mack. But according to Next Gen Stats, do you want to hear this? The Raiders double-teamed Khalil Mack on 2 out of his 63 snaps. Only 2. And that's roughly about 3%, maybe a little bit more than 3% of his total snaps on the field. So now not only is he a egotistical, self-centered, narcissistic, idiotic, but he's also a liar. If you didn't have a game plan, just say that. It wouldn't surprise us if you just came out and said, well, we didn't plan for Khalil Mack. Of course you didn't. So a lot of people have been calling him out about that. Surprisingly, a lot of people have been calling him out to his boss, Mark Davis. As you might have seen in the videos I've sent you or the videos that have been posted, I believe the first place we saw it was Bleacher Report. There were fans arguing with Mark Davis, and Mark Davis was arguing back at them. And that, that's what you get for building a stadium with an open press box. What do you think's going to happen? And so everybody's yelling at him like, hey, fire him. What are you doing? Why are you ruining this team? As they would. And I'm not sure entirely what the context of the argument was, but I know it was about McDaniels, and Mark Davis told the fan to smarten up. And he came back with, why don't you smarten up? And then it just blew into a whole thing. And so I think if Mark Davis should fire anybody, the first person he should fire is his barber. Don't you agree?
Oh, please. You saw that from the top comment of that video. You're not so smooth yourself. What's funny to me, though, is the fact that they weren't at home. They were in the fucking Chargers playground.
Yeah, so my mistake. You're correct on that. They were in SoFi Stadium, and so for whatever reason, I was thinking they were in Vegas. But anyway, so yeah, they were arguing with the fans, and obviously it's Los Angeles. There's a lot of Raider fans there. So because we used to play in Los Angeles. Forgive me. And they were going back and forth, and that happened. So I don't know. Continue with your thoughts.
This is such a shit episode already. We shouldn't have been drinking since the start. No, but I don't understand why he's getting on it with the fans. If like you say he knows he's wrong, but he's too prideful to admit it. I think he believes he made a right choice. I think they're going through a rebuilding phase, and I have to let Josh, get a sailor's feet and all that bullshit. But at the end of the day, they're just a shit team. I think Mark has gone the way of Al Davis and has lost his freaking mind. Like you said with that joke, like he should have fired his barber. Yeah, that's a shitty haircut. But I also think that the reason why he's not firing McDaniels, and a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but some people are saying that it's because McDaniels has a guarantee clause where, like, if he gets fired, Mark Davis has to pay him like $20 million, like some ridiculous number. And, if you're willing to not only choose McDaniels to be your head coach, but still keep him on, I think that's the case. So that's what I think about that. And I think let's move on from that because it's just the same old bullshit. We've heard it a million times before. You said it yourself. You might be done with football for the rest of the season because they're a shit team, and I don't think they're going to change. The fact that here's a funny thing, though. The fact that the Raiders still beat the Broncos, but the Bears couldn't. That's the fucking astounding thing. It's like, what the fuck? But anyway, let's move on from that, and let's go quickly to talk about the mighty have fallen. The Dolphins. God. They did not fare well this week. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as you probably heard last week, the Miami Dolphins put up impressive numbers against the Denver Broncos, scoring 70 points. And so for a minute there, we were all thinking that the Miami Dolphins were big-time contenders here in the AFC. We were all thinking, they might be the best team in the AFC. Well, the Bills balled that up, threw it back in their face. Said, nope, you might can drop 70 on one of the worst teams in football, but you're not even going to come close to us. And so it was a blowout win by the Bills. I still think the Miami Dolphins are a talented team, but, they've got a lot to figure out here. And we didn't see that at first. We thought they were ready. Clearly not yet. But looking at the Bills, for the past several years, me and you both have been guilty of buying into the Bills, believing in them as Super Bowl contenders, and they make it so close, but not close enough. And it was starting to get disappointing. I think earlier you called them the AFC's New Orleans Saints, and that would be kind of correct. So I don't want to say that I'm buying into it completely, but besides the 49ers, bang, bang, Niner gang, the Buffalo Bills are the best team in the NFL. I definitely think they're the best team in the AFC. But time will tell if they deserve that AFC title, let alone the Super Bowl. So, I don't know. Do you believe in the Bills? Do you believe in Josh Allen?
See, that's such an interesting question because, like you said, we did buy into the whole Bill Mafia hype. And the last 2 years were like, oh, they were so fucking close. But they've been so fucking close for so long that you're like, all right, is this going to pan out? Are you just missing that it factor? Because to go into, let's say, wrestling and Formula One. In Formula One, those 20 drivers are some of the best drivers in the entire world. A lot of them have won every championship that they've entered. But when they reach Formula One, they're like, oh shit, I'm a decent driver, but I'm not the best driver. Same with wrestling. Like, you have some wrestlers who, for example, we talked about him last week, Dolph Ziggler. He could wrestle, he could talk, but he just missed that it factor. And I feel that's the same thing with the Bills. Like, they have an amazing team, a really good coach, and they perform well. Like, they've gotten to the championships, but it's more like a more successful version of the Cowboys, who for the last, 25 years or more, they've gone into the playoffs and they're eliminated first round. So at some point you have to say, well, are they any good? Because to go on to another team, the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, we hear a lot of great things about Jalen Hurts. Hell, he negotiated his contract earlier this year to become the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. And a lot of people are saying, well, are you worth the money? Because you went to the Super Bowl, you didn't win. And some people will say, well, Jalen Hurts is better than Patrick Mahomes. Personally, I kind of believe it too. But we're still not getting that Super Bowl win. And I know some fans are saying like, oh, well, a Super Bowl win doesn't mean everything. No, motherfucker, it does. That's why you're playing for a championship. That's why you're in the NFL. You want to win the big title. And another person who is like this is Lamar Jackson, another great quarterback. But he's been with the Ravens so long, and the Ravens have gotten close, but they just can't seem to grab that brass ring. And I think the Bills are in the same category. They're a phenomenal team, but they're just missing that factor to push them over the edge.
Yeah, you talked about Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. I think the field for them in their division is wide open at this point in the AFC East. You've got the Steelers, who Steelers are the Steelers. You got the Browns, who the Browns are the Browns. And the Bengals are the most disappointing team in the league right now. They're not doing anything. They're dead. I mean, Jamar Chase probably going to be requesting a trade within the next few weeks. So, and that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But as far as their division, it's all the Ravens. But can they compete with the rest of the field? Can they compete with I'll even say it, the Miami Dolphins? Can they go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs? The Jets are in that conversation. So that's where I'm at with the Baltimore Ravens. I think Lamar is going to do something big soon. Maybe not this year, maybe next year, maybe we'll see it the year after. But the main thing is he needs weapons around him that he just doesn't have anymore. From one team, I mentioned the Niners earlier while we were talking about the Bills. The 49ers are the best team in football right now. Period. Yes. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, but no, they are. They're putting up ridiculous numbers. They're undefeated. They got Christian McCaffrey, who's probably going to win the MVP this year. Brock Purdy is slinging that ball. They've got a top 10 defense. This is a team you need to take seriously. If you were going to take any other team in the NFL seriously, it's the 49ers. And I think it's going to be interesting watching the 49ers versus the Eagles here, because those two are the two best teams in the NFC, period. I'm curious to see who will stand out from there. But as of right now, to me, the 49ers are the best team in football. What do you think?
I think you got turds hanging out from your nose, your mouth, your ears, your eyes. I don't see that happening. I think the 49ers are a decent team. I will admit that. But here's the thing. It's still early on in the season. You can go undefeated for 4 or 5 games in a row and then completely bomb out the rest of the season. Or you can bomb out most of the season and yet come out looking good at the end of the year, such as the Raiders did in 2021 when they had Rich Pistachio as the interim head coach. But look, I will admit, Brock Purdy, talented kid, but I don't think he's ready. I don't think that with him and the other guy whose name I already forgot, I don't think they're going to go far in the NFL season. I think they're going to do pretty good, and maybe in a year or 2, maybe 3, when Brock Purdy has a little bit more experience under his belt, that they may challenge for the Super Bowl win. But right now, I don't see it personally. I think it's too early to call it. And quite frankly, I think you're full of shit. So that's my opinion on it. But anyway, let's move on from NFL. And let's talk about the biggest news in professional wrestling. The debut of the Rated R superstar, Adam Copeland. Who?
Yes, everybody formerly knew him as Edge. Even MJF referred to him as Edge in the press conference. A lot of people are hating on this, and I don't really understand why. And I'm going to get you to explain to me why. But look, this is a guy, he's at the tail end of his career. We get that. He's already retired once due to a neck injury back in 2011, I believe. He's a Hall of Famer in the WWE. And a lot of people are just hating and hating and hating. And they're like, well, he can go to AEW and he can just die. And I'm like, look, the bottom line is he was dying in WWE. They weren't doing anything with him. He was just sitting at home. And this is a guy, he wants to go somewhere. He wants to do something. He wants to do something different. Where better than AEW, where he can have a rivalry against his best friend, Christian, for that TNT title, which I'm excited for because we know we're going to get good wrestling. I don't know. I think I think this is going to turn out great, and I'm happy for him because I know that Tony Khan is paying him a shit ton of money. So, also, fun fact: did you hear in his entrance the "You Think You Know Me"? That was actually the voice of his wife Beth Phoenix that said the "You Think You Know Me," and he got his original music back, but of course, it wasn't WWE's music, and he's actually pretty close with the members of Alter Bridge, so they were like, "Yeah, sure." So, but yeah, it was good to hear him with his own music. He's still the rated R superstar, but even though he's not Edge, he's Adam Copeland, but whatever. So I'm excited to see how this will go. What do you think?
I'm not as pessimistic as everybody seems to be. I think the big issue is, Edge has been a really great star in the past. 2011, I believe, is when he suffered a neck injury that forced him to be retired for over a decade. So a lot of people still remember him as this top level WWE superstar. And then when he came back, like you said, he wasn't really used by WWE. And in the AEW press conference they did after the show, and also in some of the interviews he's done before his AEW debut, he talked about how there was issues with re-signing him. WWE wanted to use him in some manner, and he disagreed. He didn't think that that's the way he wanted to go. What I'm probably guessing, and a lot of people who are smart to the business are guessing, is the WWE wanted to phase him out because he wasn't getting as many pops as before when he debuted. But I personally blame that on the creative side of wrestling because the WWE was using him like shit. For some reason, they made him the founder of this tag team called the Judgment Day, and then they turned on him, and then they made Finn Balor the leader of the group, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, this is some horse shit. And like stuff like that, and overall, he's kind of been invisible in his last run in WWE, and I think that he didn't want to finish it that way. I know he said his kids say, hey, why don't you go and wrestle with Uncle Jay? And he's like, that's one of the reasons why I did it. But I think he wants to have one final good run. He wants to go out on his own terms. The WWE wanted to phase him out, and that's going out on their terms. He wants to go out on his, and he wants to have a ball doing it. I think the matches will be incredible as long as the Dinosaur and Darby Allin and Nick Wayne know their P's and Q's and listen to Edge and Christian because they know what they're doing in the ring. They've been at this longer than Nick Wayne's been alive, for God's sake. The kid's only 18 years old. So I think this is an opportunity for everybody in AEW to listen to Edge and Christian and be like, okay, these guys have been doing this far longer than us, have been at the top level of this profession, and have been amazing at it. And I think that's what is irking some of the WWE marks. They're only pro WWE. They hate anybody who's coming into WWE who's not from the WWE developmental system. And they hate everybody in AEW. We've seen that online. If you look at the comment sections of any post that says WWE or AEW, you would probably get a majority saying, fuck the WWE or fuck AEW. And a few that say, can't we just get along, folks? So they want Edge to fail because they don't want him to be in AEW. Now, some people have really good reasons why Edge shouldn't go to AEW. For one, AEW is notorious for basically fucking up. I mean, they had a few great stars go through their roster and they left, such as Jade Cargill, which did WWE on purpose, made a big deal about signing her. Now, I don't think Jade was pretty good in the ring, nor was she on the mic, but she had potential. And the more we're hearing about her now that she's doing interviews and talking about why she left AEW, it sounds more like, well, basically the only person who gave a shit about how I actually do this shit left for WWE, saying Cody Rhodes, or was fired, aka CM Punk. So she wanted to go somewhere where she could actually learn, in her own words, to be a leader. And that's something that in AEW, they're okay with being mediocre in the ring. And they have come out, and multiple AEW stars have come out and said, well, we don't care what the old-timers say or what they suggest. We're going to do what we want to do. Case in point, Jungle Boy. Apparently, a lot of people were telling him, hey, Junkle Jack off. Do not go through a windshield. It is dangerous. We can't gimmick it up, saying we can't make it candy glass or some kind of glass where you won't cut yourself and your opponent. He said, fuck them, and he still did it. And, so like I was going back to what I was saying, some of the fans are saying, well, that's going to happen again. They're going to ignore him, and maybe he steps on the wrong toes, and maybe there'll be another CM Punk EVP thing where they're like, well, fuck you. You don't know what you're doing. You're a cancer to this business. Because that's what happened with CM Punk. He came in, he thought, oh, wow, here, I'll help you guys out because I've been doing this for such a long time. And they all said, no, we don't want to listen to you. Even though you've been one of the biggest stars in this profession, even though you were seen by hundreds of millions of people worldwide, even though you sold millions of dollars worth of merchandise, even though a lot of people still remember you. Like, these people in AEW don't care. For example, I have a great friend. His name is Jacob. I don't think he's ever going to listen to this, but Jacob is a big Edge fan. And when Edge debuted at the Royal Rumble a few years ago, when he finally made his return, he texted me and he was like, dude, Edge has come back. And now that I showed him like this clip where like Edge came out at Wrestle Dream or Dream Wrestle, whatever the fuck, Dream Wrestle, whatever they call it. I sent him the clip and he's like, dude, oh my God, I did not know that I needed Edge teaming up with Sting fighting Christian. So there are people who want to see Edge and are coming out of the woodwork to watch wrestling just for Edge. And I don't know how Jacob's going to perceive it, but he's only watched WWE. And maybe he sees the AEW and he's going to go, what is this shit? Why is there a guy who dances around and does finger banging? Why is there a guy with his hands in his pockets? And why are they doing crappy wrestling? What's with the dinosaur? So I see where both sides come from. I see the ones that are happy to see Edge in AEW, and I see the people who are not happy about it. Because think about who's come to AEW from the WWE. Matt Hardy has been blah. Jeff Hardy has been an embarrassment. Malachi Black was a disappointment. Andrade, look, I speak Spanish and English. I can't understand what Andrade is saying, and he speaks Spanish. You've had Soraya, who was known as Paige. She has been, the fans haven't really cared. Toni Storm, I don't like her gimmick. I think it's stupid. And, yeah, that's pretty much been everybody from WWE.
Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley,
there, thank you. Jon Moxley. Basically, before we get on more of a tangent, I'm excited to see what the AEW is going to look like, but at the same time, I know what's going to happen, and I know he's going to get ignored. His suggestions are going to go into deaf ears, and I know it's still going to be the same shit. And even during the match, I was listening to a review of it on the Jim Cornette drive-thru, the clips that they do on YouTube. And they were talking about, well, you can tell that Christian didn't want to do this move and that they had to change it out because he wasn't comfortable, suplexing Darby Allin into the steps. I think that's what it was. And it's like, well, that's the issue. People want to do these stupid stuff that they're going to get hurt. You have these veterans who know better, and they're like, especially Edge and Christian, who develop a lot of these over-the-top bumps, falling off ladders, chairs, tables, all that stuff. They basically pioneered this shit in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I think if anybody should know, like, you don't want to do that you should listen. But that's the thing with AEW wrestlers. They don't listen. Anyway, I went on a rant about that. Do you have any more comments on that before we move on to motorsport?
Yeah, I just had a couple more. First it was Cody Rhodes. Then it was CM Punk. Is Edge going to be next? I think so. But hopefully he gets a good run out of it before we get to see him go, because, Punk got a good little run out of it. Cody had a, half decent run towards the end there. It was a little weird. But also, Edge is debuting on Dynamite. Is it tonight as we speak? Tuesday. That's right, because it's the same night that they do NXT. Running opposition to them is WWE's NXT. They have stacked that card to compete against it. So I think it'll be interesting. I know they have Paul Heyman They have John Cena on the show, Becky Lynch, all those guys. It's gonna be interesting to see if we might have a Tuesday night battle there. So, but anyway, you wanted to move on to Formula One. Is that correct?
Not exactly Formula One, but a little bit of Formula One. So let's talk a little bit about some motorsport news. Right now, Romain Grosjean, who was an ex-Formula One driver, if you've seen the Drive to Survive series, 2020, he's the one that crashed out and his car split in half and it was a big fiery explosion. Well, anyway, after that season, he was let go. He was already let go before that explosion, but he was let go and he actually went to Indy Car racing. And he's actually been driving with Andretti Motorsport. And Andretti this year said, basically, we're cutting you loose from your contract. And Roman is a decent driver. The issue with him is he's not consistent enough. And what I mean by that is he always finds himself in the middle of an accident. It doesn't matter if they're going fast or going slow. If there's a way, he will find it. So they let him go of his contract, and right now he's actually suing Andretti, saying that, well, you breached our contract, you can't fire me, and he's trying to keep his seat, which I'm not sure how it's going to go. This just came out today, and I actually learned of it because I saw his post on Instagram. So, this is very fresh news. Now, the other news, and we actually talked about it last week, we'll mention it more likely. Last week, we talked about how Andretti Motorsport was possibly coming into Formula One. Now we have been confirmed by the FIA that Andretti Motorsport is coming to Formula One. I'm not sure about the date because they're trying to work out the copyright and the stuff like that. So they can put them in the video games, they can put them on the TV shows and stuff like that. But I'm thinking they're going to come in 2026. Mario Andretti, the owner, said that they'd be ready by 2026, have all the facilities up and running. So that'll be interesting. And Cadillac is actually going to be partnering up with them. And they're just essentially going to be a main sponsor. So it's going to be Andretti Cadillac, and it's probably going to be powered by a Renault. I do remember there was rumors going around that if Andretti did get the 11th team spot, they would be powered by Renault, which, I'm sorry, you're not going to see Andretti in the podiums if they're powered by a French car. Anyway, in other news, Alex Palou, I don't know if you remember this kid. We talked about him last year. To give a little background information about this.
Hey, was he the guy with the jelly beans and the midget?
No, that was Orton. No, essentially, Alex Palou is the current IndyCar world champion. And last year, if you remember, there was this big fiasco where Oscar Piastri was signed to Alpine as a reserve driver, but his contract essentially was up for grabs and he didn't want to re-sign with them. So he said, hey, I'm driving for McLaren. And they said, what? What are you talking about? You're driving for us, Alpine. Because Fernando said, fuck you guys. Fuck you guys. Anyway, at the same time, it was announced that Chip Ganassi Racing lost Alex Palou to McLaren, and that he was going to be a reserve driver for McLaren as well as drive for the McLaren IndyCar team. Now it's come out that Alex said, no, I'm not going to drive for McLaren IndyCar team. I'm going to stick with Chip Ganassi, which in a sense makes sense. He won the world championship with them. He has a higher chance of still winning the world championship for next year because the season's over for IndyCar. But part of his contract, and this is what's pissing off McLaren, is they are okay with him staying with Chip Ganassi Racing. That's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is they also signed him to be the reserve driver for McLaren once the IndyCar season ended. And one of the reasons why he agreed to it was because he was going to be given that chance to possibly drive for McLaren because they didn't know if Oscar was going to work out. If Oscar didn't work out, they'd have been like, hey, Alex, here's a seat in F1. And I'm pretty sure that's why he signed on with them. But now that the season's over for IndyCar, he's saying, I'm not going with you guys. I'm not showing up to the F1 races. And now that's the big issue. McLaren says he breached their contract. And now they're saying, well, you owe us not only for not going and being our reserve driver, but for backing out of our deal with McLaren IndyCar team. And we're suing you for $20 million. So that's the big news going on in motorsport right now. And I'm not sure how it's going to end, but
This is such a weird scenario. It's a lot like the Alex Albon scenario. Lots of similarities. I just want to know, who is at fault here? Is it both parties? Is it McLaren?
the way I look at it, and I'm looking at it from like a legal standpoint, if Alex Palou signed a deal, a contract that says, I agreed to race for McLaren IndyCar team with the possibility of having an F1 seed if I'm a reserve driver for them after the IndyCar season's over. That's the important bit. After the IndyCar season's over with. They weren't going to say, oh, you're going to race with, you're going to be a reserve driver and come to every race on the F1 calendar. And they're like, no, like, as soon as you're done with your season, you know, you can come with us and you can, you know, race around and we'll let you drive the car, which they actually announced him to be driving the car in Abu Dhabi. So for me, if Alex did sign a contract, well, you're in the wrong. Because remember, this all started when he decided to go from Chip Ganassi Racing to McLaren. Now, if McLaren didn't actually give him a seat for F1, if that's what he was promised, well, was it written in the contract? That's the thing. Does it say if it's the possibility in F1 seat? Well, McLaren didn't lie. They didn't know if Oscar was going to be the perfect driver for them. He is. He got a podium last week, or 2 weeks ago. So they're going to stick with Oscar Piastri for a while. And I can get that Alex is frustrated. He's like, oh, fuck it, I'm not dealing with this shit. I'm not doing extra work and all that stuff. But if you sign a contract and you've been paid for it, and you backed out of the IndyCar deal, and I'm not 100% sure if they were cool, but it sounds like they were cool with him backing out and still being the reserve driver. But now he's backed out of that. You're in the wrong, dude. Like, you signed a contract, and now you gotta honor it, or you gotta get sued. That's the only way. Now, if it was just a handshake deal, well, McLaren has no reason why to sue him, because it's a handshake deal. It really doesn't matter, or it does matter, but it's not as legal binding as a contract. But yeah, that's the way I looked at it. I think Alex is in the wrong. I'm not saying McLaren is a saint, but Alex signed a contract and he reneged on the deal. After it's been signed, you renege on a deal, you got to pay the consequences.
Watch it go to court and it comes out that he never signed a contract.
Oh, God.
Then that's just
Alpine
like
all over again.
Alpine. It's crazy to me that can happen. Like, this team can just be like, well, you signed with us and you're going to race for us. And he, you know, like Alex Albon, no, I didn't. And they get out of it. I don't know. That's strange to me. That doesn't happen in the NFL. That doesn't happen in what it might happen in NBA. NBA is just outlaw. Anything goes at this point, you know? But I don't know. There's some kind of miscommunication here.
It is. And also, you're thinking of Oscar Piastri because Alex Albon was on loan from Red Bull and his contract ended and now he's a Williams driver. Although he has a chance to sign with another team next year. So there's always a possibility of that. But anyway, I think we've rambled on long enough. We've ranted on. We've drunkenly spoke. I don't know how much of this is usable. So yeah, this is the end of the Waterboy experience. We've rambled on long enough. We've kind of drunkenly talked a lot. I don't know how much of it is usable. We were kind of buzzed towards the beginning of this episode. But anyway, sign us off, white boy.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please be sure to follow us at the Waterboy EXP on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at the Waterboy Pod. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Waterboy Experience. We will see you next week with hopefully a better quality show and not nearly as intoxicated. And peace.
I got blisters on my fingers.
Second and goal just outside the 10. Carr zips it in, and it's Palou. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. representing greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively